Hello, well, this is Dr. Dave Maslach talking about reciprocity.com, the sharing economy proofreading platform that I am trying to build. The E is spelled with a 3. So what I want to get into is how do you write an amazing hypothesis section in a research article. This is all part of my Words in Science series that I put out. It's all the stuff that I put out on Wednesdays. I call it Nerd Out Wednesdays as well. And it's all just kind of things that I found interesting in science and things that I like to talk about because I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship. So these are different things that I think might be really, really helpful to those that are learning to get into science, learning about science, all that kind of stuff. And it's really definitely geared towards graduate students or those that are senior undergraduate students that are really interested in getting into a graduate degree in a business school where we do this kind of stuff. And so this is going to help you out. I'm hoping that this video helps you out. And what I'm going to get into in this particular video, there's a whole series of I'm getting into how to actually write different articles and stuff like that, scientific articles. And this particular one is how to write a hypothesis section, or the different things that I've learned along the way and how to improve your hypothesis section, how to actually write it up, right? So I'm going to get into what exactly is a hypothesis section, what do you do with your hypothesis section, and then what are sort of the norms and standards that we look for in a hypothesis section in a major research article. Now, this could be really helpful for those of you who are thinking of doing this for a science fair or science project or something like that. This definitely will help you out. This video will help you out because I'm going to go through and sort of talk about the normal standard way of doing things that we as scientists do this kind of stuff, right? So what is a hypothesis section? That is a section where you provide, based on the theory that you've already have, so you can look at my older videos, that you have some sort of theory and how you explain the world, and then you use that theory to come up with some hypothesis that actually can explain that theory. And what you're trying to do with a hypothesis section is try to falsify or rule out those hypotheses from existing. That's the whole goal with science, is that we have a belief that the world behaves in a certain way, and we're trying to rule out that belief as much as we can, because if we can rule out that belief, then that means we can move on and do something else that's more suitable, right? So that's the whole goal of science, is always try to refute or falsify what we believe that the world is occurring. So each hypothesis is supposed to try to explain or try to sort of project onto the world and how you think the world should be, and that is based on the theory that you have, right? So it's really important to think about that, and then you're trying to disprove that in one way or the other. And so there's often what's called a hypothesis that you provide, and these are based on some sort of constructs that are based on the theory. And what you do is you have the theoretical rationale, and you detail that theoretical rationale, and then you get into each hypothesis. And normally the what was kind of the norm in the past, particularly in our field, we'd have a lot of hypotheses, like 10, 15 different hypotheses that you would sort of dream up and think about based on the theory. But the norm, or the way that the scientific research articles are going now, is they're going to 1 to 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 hypothesis, no more than that, where you're really trying to detail and really explain what is going on with each one of those hypotheses. And you can imagine with the hypothesis section, what you're starting off with is a very rudimentary sort of basic hypothesis that, chances are that you can't refute that because it is so sort of part of how we understand the world. It's usually something that is sort of a rigorous finding, and then you go on and you keep building on top of that sort of more novel insights as you go. And what you're trying to do is kind of build kind of a climax, or something in the story. If you think of science as storytelling, you're trying to go to the end where you are saying that there is some sort of really novel insight based, and that's usually where you end your final hypothesis, is based on this novel insight of building this story along the way. So the way that you start off with your first hypothesis is you really want to define and go through your dependent variable, the construct for the dependent variable, and detail as much as you can that dependent variable and the different relationships with that. In fact, just explain it, what it is, And then you go into how you might think that the independent variable sort of works, and this is your construct for your independent variable. And this is all based on the theory, right? So you're thinking about the theory in how this actually works, and then that independent variable you're thinking, or that construct for the independent variable, you're thinking how it actually relates, in effect, the dependent variable. And the cool thing is, what you want to try to do is explain a different rationale and different theories or different explanations of how that actually might occur, right? So you want to first suggest that there's a relationship between the dependent variable and independent variable, right? So the independent variable somehow leading to the dependent variable, and you have 3 or 4 different explanations how that is. Then you want to sort of explain what the relationship looks like, whether it's going up or whether it's going down. Maybe that they are, maybe that at one moment in time that the relationship is going to be very weak, and in other moments can be very strong, and maybe that there's sort of what's called a U-shaped relationship, where at sort of high levels of the independent variable, that the dependent variable is going to be at one location, and then sort of moderate levels, the dependent variable is going to be at another location, and then at extremely low levels of the independent variable, that the dependent variable is going to be at another level. And that's what you're trying to do, is explain these different relationships and how they work and what you're going to expect to see. And then you sort of leave one of the hypotheses, you sort of come up with a hypothesis, and you have this kind of direct relationship. So for example, the independent variable is going to lead to increases in the dependent variable, and that's the wording you really want to do. Or something like the independent variable is going to lead to decreases in the dependent variable. So the more ice cream you eat, the more likely you are going to gain weight, right? The greater amounts of ice cream you consume, the higher the more increases you're going to expect with weight gain, right? So something along that lines, where you're sort of seeing this relationship over time, and you're trying to explain that relationship. And that's going to be one hypothesis, and that is all just one hypothesis. And then you go on to another one that you're building up the story along the way, right? So you want to build, maybe it is, so we might see this relationship between ice cream, eating ice cream and gaining weight, but then you might suggest, well, that's only for different kinds of ice cream. That the second hypothesis might be on for ice cream that contains a high amount of lactose, there might be greater increases in weight gain than the ice cream that only contains a small amount of lactose. And maybe that there is some sort of relationship there. And that is called like a moderating relationship. And that's kind of what we're looking for, is these kind of different ways of viewing the world. We have this, the first hypothesis is usually really straightforward, where you say that one leads to the other, but then you might have, in the second and third hypothesis, you might have sort of moderating relationships. Or maybe you introduce another variable and that all goes away. So maybe it is, and that's basically a moderating relationship, but maybe for those people who exercise regularly, that their weight gain will not occur. Right, so due to eating ice cream. And that's kind of stuff what you're trying to look at, is these different relationships over time. You're kind of just building this scaffold, or you're building the story along the way, where it gets more and more complicated. And that's usually, once you get to hypothesis 3, 4, that is your big punchline, right? So that is, yes, eating ice cream leads to weight gain, but it's not going to lead to weight gain for those that eat low lactose ice cream as well as exercise regularly. And maybe for those that have a lot of fiber in their diet, right? So you can eat a lot of ice cream, but as long as you have fiber in your diet, everything's going to be fine. And that's kind of what we're looking at along the way. And that's going to be the punchline, where you can sort of dream something up that makes a lot of sense, and as well as sort of explains the world in some novel way. Maybe it's if people possess a certain enzyme, for example, in their gut enzyme, that weight gain is not going to occur, because maybe that enzyme is eating up all of the lactose, or maybe it's eating up all of the milk fat, for example, and then those ones are not going to gain weight. And that's what you're trying to explain, and that's a really cool punchline, by the way. That's a really cool story that kind of sells and people are really interested in, because then you know that you can go get tested for that particular enzyme, or they can create products, for example, to get that enzyme or something along those lines, or we can start exploring about the science behind enzymes, gut enzymes, and how they work and stuff like that. So that's really interesting what we're trying to get at. So again, this is the real meat and potatoes. This is a real important part of your paper. And it's also really difficult to write because you have to think about these different mechanisms. So for example, the ice cream example, it might be that gut enzymes are really important. It might be sort of regulating your blood sugars, for example, are really important. Those are two separate mechanisms. There might be that, for example, the amount of exercise that you have, and something along those lines. That's the third mechanism. All those things matter, and you have to explain those and suggest that those do matter, as well as explaining or ruling out different explanations on how they might actually how they might affect that relationship. And you can sort of rule those out at the same time when you're explaining those relationships. And that's really how you are building up and creating that story, right? So hopefully you like this video, and I'd like to get into a lot more, but there are some older videos you can look at and how I actually get into and explain this kind of stuff. I hope it's very useful. You can leave some comments if you want and tell me what you would like to know, or different things along those lines, what to expect, and hopefully I can answer them or create another video. That's actually what I want to do, is create some more videos based on your comments and sort of give you some feedback that way. So thank you so much. If you like this video, do the old thumbs up. You can do the old that's fine as well. You can go and watch some old videos, how I detail some of this stuff. And if you're interested in this reciprocity project, it's a sharing economy proofreading platform that I'm trying to build, and I'm actually trying to help out graduate students with it and build it out, so I can actually start giving some scholarships if it ever becomes profitable. I don't know if it's ever going to become profitable, but my goal is to eventually, if it does become profitable, then I can actually start giving some graduate scholarships and stuff in behavioral science. I'm really excited about being able to do that. With that, thank you so much for listening, and I am really looking forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye.